Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing and Fabric has what you need for your creative adventure. If it's sewing, embroidery, or vinyl projects you need for a home business, Etsy, Pinterest, and your family, we have it. Mid-South Sewing sells Brothers Sewing and Embroidery machines and the latest scan and cut crafting machine. Mid-South Sewing and Fabric in the Gallery Shopping Center.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by The Flower Pot. For over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on this edition of Tennessee Life, we bring you 3 unique collections, from homey and historic to musical and the unusual. First, we go to Songbirds Guitar Museum in Chattanooga. There's much more than musical history to see here.
Every guitar in here has a wonderful story that's attached to it. You come in here, you want a great history lesson about pop culture and why everything changed. You know, why they came out with custom color guitars at the same time they came out with color TV. I mean, they were thinking.
For most of us, salt and pepper shakers are just everyday items. But for one woman, they were her passion. A legacy her daughter carries on in Gatlinburg today at the Salt and Pepper Shaker Museum.
It slowly grew. So slowly, just started with a few salt and pepper shakers, and from there we got into more salt and pepper shakers and more salt and pepper shakers. There were 2,000 in the house, the rest were in boxes underneath the house. Once you put them out of sight, it's kind of out of mind, so you don't really know how many were underneath the house. That's when she started pulling them out again. We all started to appreciate the value behind them. And we were like, why not? Let's share this with other people.
From strange artifacts to optical illusions and hands-on experiences, you get a big dose of the odd and unusual at Ripley's Odditorium.
I think you could kind of say that the odd is very similar to the fear of the unknown. And this is kind of a safe place to embrace the unknown. These are the things that people do or make or create that we don't understand. And so to be able to come into one place and learn a little bit about other cultures and things that they do that we consider odd, that they just consider everyday life.
Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. In this episode, we take a closer look at some of the unique collections in our state. We start with the Songbirds Guitar Museum in Chattanooga. Hundreds of guitars are on display in just about every color and design you can imagine. And you don't need to be a guitar enthusiast to appreciate the walk through history these instruments provide.
Some of these have great stories and provenance and folklore that tell you where the guitar came from and how it got to us. A lot of these guitars toured the world. Some toured the world with famous people. Some just played a lot of smoky honky-tonks. That's one of the great things that we can offer here, is that people can see all different types of guitars that come from all different places.
Songbirds is not just for guitar players. It's not just looking at awesome guitars in an awesome building. It's learning how our culture changed because of the invention of this thing. I'm Johnny Smith. I'm the president of Songbirds Guitar Museum located in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Songbirds is a collection that started from a group of guys that were collectors and had an idea of wanting to show their instruments in a public setting.
I collected guitars. I always worked in music stores. When I was 12 years old, I walked into a local music store in my hometown, and a guy who worked there asked me if I could help unload a truck for $5. He offered me a job working there basically for the price of a sandwich. Basically, I got paid by getting a free lunch. They say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but there was. And I learned the basics, but the best thing is that the guitar tech that worked down in the basement, he had taught me the difference in the sounds of the old instruments versus the newer instruments that you could buy upstairs in the store brand new. When old guitars would come in for repair, he would put them in my hands, and you could feel, hear the tonal differences and the way the guitar responded to you. It was obvious, a great point was made to me that the older instruments were much better than the newer ones. Sometimes it takes 4 or 5 years to buy a guitar from someone. There's a lot of sentimental value, and you can't easily separate somebody from something like that. You know, some of these people that own some of these beautiful instruments, their sons went off to Vietnam and didn't come home, and they kept that guitar and they treasured that guitar as something that belonged to their child. And then eventually it came a time they were retiring themselves, maybe they were relocating, they didn't want to carry that heavy thing with them, and they'd made a decision to sell it, and they would call people like myself. Probably around 17 or 1800 guitars, and probably somewhere around 200 million overall. We've paid over $1 million for guitars on occasion.
So the amount of guitars that Songbirds shows right now is 530. That represents about 1/3 of the collection that we have. That's enormous. It's a lot of vintage guitars, but what it gives us the ability to do is to change the displays out and have something fresh and new happening all the time.
Well, we're actually standing in the vault here at Songbirds Guitar Museum, and what makes this room different than all the other rooms is that each guitar in this room, we can actually open the case, we can take these guitars out and discuss them. We can actually put them into the customer's hands, which is something that we can't do with some of the other cases. We can talk about a lot of different guitars in this room, but there are guitars that really work for me as far as their history, their provenance, their story. The guitar that's in front of me right here is a great instance. This is a 1954 Stratocaster. It's the very first year. The thing that makes this guitar different than every other Stratocaster ever made is it was made by Fender's employees as a gift to the Vice President of Fender, George Fullerton, as a thank you for creating this guitar and making a new production line and keeping many people working. So this guitar is made very, very differently than any other Fender Stratocaster. One of the great parts of the story was that he felt that the guitar was too beautiful to play. And it's actually in its original condition, just as it had left the factory. It's pristine and it's virtually never been played. Even the original strings reside on the guitar. That's a pretty amazing thing based on the fact that we're talking about 60 plus years.
The invention of the electric guitar changed everything. So now the guy that's singing doesn't have to be playing a horn. He can be singing, playing the guitar, and then all you need, and since it's amplified, you've got the electric bass beside him and the drummer, and it kind of created this new sound I think we refer to as rock and roll these days. Rock and roll was going through the television into households, and so all of a sudden this instrument not only changed the sound of music, it changed culture, especially with TV. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to look like Buddy Holly. They want to wear the shoes he wore and the suits that he wore and the hairstyle that he had. The guitar's relation to music is one thing, but the music's relation to culture is another. We've tried to kind of take you on a timeline, like the way the museum's set up when you first come in and get your introduction. We go through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now there's a lot of history there in regards to how the guitar impacted music, but there's also a lot of manufacturing technologies that have changed throughout time. In the 50s, everything was kind of handmade. You start going into the 60s, things started becoming a little bit different in their manufacturing processes. By the 70s, most of the major guitar manufacturers had sold out to larger companies, and so you can see that they were more worried about the gross numbers.
You come in here, you want a great history lesson about pop culture and why everything changed. You know, why they came out with custom color guitars at the same time they came out with color TV. I mean, they were thinking. They were thinking about what people wanted to see. There were so many creative minds at work. The biggest selling colors ever of Fender and Gibson guitars were red, white, and blue. They were the color of our flag. 95% of electric guitar players in 1965 were male. They didn't want the pastel colors that were available, and that's why the pastel colors are worth so much money now, because they made so few.
It's a beautiful story I like to share where there was a guitar that we had where it belonged to the wife, that the guitar was used by the wife and the husband played trumpet, and they would do all these shows in Chicago. Music was their love language. Performing together was what brought them together. Unfortunately, she noted that he got tragically ill and passed away, and when he did, she put the guitar under her bed, and she kept it there for a long time. When she finally decided to part with the guitar, the one thing that she said in the bottom of the letter is, "I'm tired of this guitar living under the bed." She wanted to go to somebody that would appreciate it. What an incredible story, but I didn't even tell you the guitar it is, because it doesn't matter. It's all about the story. The guitar happens to be a very rare collectible guitar, but it's the story behind it that matters.
These are not caged animals. We take these guitars out, we put them in the hands of people that come in and do our tour. We let all our staff members play these guitars. They actually come out a few times a year and they go through a little spa treatment. They get new strings, they get polished up, they get set up nicely, and then they may either return to their case or they may go into our storage facility and other guitars replace them. So everything's always fresh and played.
You don't have to be a guitar enthusiast to appreciate a great story, and these guitars have evoked so much emotion and so many stories that we want to tell them, and it's actually, part of it's set up for your imagination to go a little wild too. Create your own memory with these instruments. For me, I want the customer, if they've got grandpa's guitar underneath their bed or a drum set in the basement that they haven't touched in a long time, it's when you leave here, be inspired to make music part of your life.
Later on Tennessee Life, we go to the Ripley's Odditorium in Gatlinburg. This Tennessee location was among the first that allowed you to see Robert Ripley's collection up close. And next, 20,000 salt and pepper shakers, and all under one roof.
You probably don't give much thought to something as simple as the salt and pepper shakers on your table. But for one woman in Tennessee, they are her passion. She views them as pieces of history, and at the Salt and Pepper Shaker Museum in Gatlinburg, you can see more than 20,000 of them.
You know, it's pretty amazing how such a small item is connected so globally. It's one of the few things that every person in the world has in common. You will find a salt container everywhere. It's that one thing that links everybody together. But again, we take it for granted until you stop and you look around the museum and you go, oh my gosh. And then you have the memories that come back from when you were visiting your grandparents or an aunt or an uncle or your mom or your dad that collected salt and pepper shakers. That's what's so amazing about something so simple that we take for granted, is how our story is told in salt and pepper shakers.
As you walk around, you can read the descriptions on.
I'm Andrea Luden, and we are here at the Salt and Pepper Shaker Museum located in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. The museum came about primarily from my mother. She was an archaeologist who worked most of her life in South America. And when we moved to the United States, she decided, out of just something of need, to find a pepper mill that would work. The one that we had at home didn't work, and so she would look out for another one, and then we would buy another one, and slowly we started getting more and more pepper mills. From the pepper mills, then she ran into salt and pepper shakers, and that's when the spark of interest really got to her. She really loved hunting for them, trying to find them in a busy antique stall or something like that. She never went into an estate sale and just buy huge numbers of salt and pepper shakers. She really loved that hunting. It slowly grew. So slowly, just start with a few salt and pepper shakers, and from there we got into more salt and pepper shakers and more salt and pepper shakers. And again, there were 2,000 in the house. The rest were in boxes underneath the house. That's when she started pulling them out again. We all started to appreciate the value behind them. And we were like, why not? Let's share this with other people. This is a labor of love. This is just my mom's dream of trying to share with others the amazing creativity found behind something so simple as a container for salt and pepper. But the ingenuity behind them, the creativity, the artistry behind them is what's so amazing. And you don't really appreciate it until you see it in context. We opened the original museum in 2002 in a place called Cosby, and then 2 years later we moved to this location in Gatlinburg. At the museum in Gatlinburg, we have a little over 20,000 sets of salt and pepper shakers. We have another museum with another 20,000 sets located in Spain, and in the grand total, we believe we're close to somewhere around 65,000 salt and pepper shakers. The history of salt and pepper shaker is really fascinating. It starts off a mortar and pestle, and then salt and pepper shakers progressed to salt cellars. And the reason it was salt cellars is because salt has a tendency of, when there's moisture or humidity in the air, to clump up and become a rock. So you can't just shake it out of a shaker like we can now. That didn't happen until 1905 or 1906, when Morton came out with an additive that he was able to put into salt grains to make them pour when it rained. That created a huge boom in salt and pepper shakers. When you pick up a salt and pepper shaker, you can tell pretty quickly which time frame they're from. So are they from the 20s? Are they from the 40s? Are they the avocado greens from the 60s and 70s? Salt and pepper shakers kind of froze a time or an era in their shapes and colors and what they represented. So you can trace how our society and civilization changes over time. So what was popular in the 20s changes by the 40s, changes until now. The museum is organized by themes and categories. One of my favorite sections, because it's so colorful, is what I call the vegetable patch. That is basically all the vegetables you can think of: carrots, tomatoes, garlic, onion. And in the vegetable patch section, you will also find snails, little elves, gnomes, and then all the way in the bottom, you'll find the potatoes, because potatoes grow underground. As you're walking around the Salt and Pepper Shaker Museum, you'll see categories such as transportation, Christmas. There's also animals, lots of animals, everything from cows, pigs, dogs, cats. The ones that I enjoy are the interactive ones. So for example, we have the Mona Lisa. So she is the salt shaker. The frame around her is the pepper shaker. You have to take her out of the pepper shaker, out of the frame, to be able to use it. My mom was privileged enough to have Dolly Parton sign a shaker in the shape of a butterfly, because we know how important butterflies are to Dolly Parton. So she signed a pair of salt and pepper shakers that we have here. Unfortunately, my mother passed away 2 years ago. It's been a struggle because she was such a force of value and life and love. And so that's what she always wanted to share with others. This is where she left her heart. This is a testament to one woman's dream and hard work and putting all of these out and just being out here for anybody and everybody to come and see and share such beautiful history. It's so wonderful to see when people will remember a memory that was 50 years ago and they go, oh my gosh, and they will run out of the museum. It doesn't matter where they are, and they have to find us and tell us about their story. That's what's so amazing. It brings back memories that we've kind of forgotten over the years, and something as simple as a salt and pepper shaker will trigger something so beautiful.
There's just something about the odd and unusual that grabs our attention. That's what draws people inside Ripley's Odditorium. This museum continues to draw in tourists with a collection of the strange and amazing, and you can decide whether to believe it or not.
I think you could kind of say that the odd is very similar to the fear of the unknown. And this is kind of a safe place to embrace the unknown. These are the things that people do or make or create that we don't understand, that may not be part of our lifestyle, and to be able to see that. And also a lot of the odd is just different cultures. And so to be able to come into one place and learn a little bit about other cultures and things that they do that we consider odd, that they just consider everyday life. My name's Andy Taylor, and I am the operations manager here for Ripley's in Gatlinburg, and we are at the flagship attraction of what is the Ripley entertainment family, the Ripley's Believe It or Not Odditorium. And this is where it really started with Robert Ripley and his adventures around the world and his collection of oddities. This particular attraction that we're sitting in here opened in 1970, but it really started in 1890 when Robert Ripley was born. He did a lot of things. He started off, he wanted to be a professional baseball player, and then he went into this world of radio broadcasts and writing his comic strip that's still running today. But what he did that was so unusual and odd is he traveled the world for 35 years, visited 201 countries, collecting over 25,000 artifacts. And so that's what we really started with. And in 1933, he launched the first auditorium at the Chicago World's Fair to over 2 million visitors. And so that was really what launched the collection that we have today, and people being able to come out and see it. And no longer was he just cartooning about it, but you could come and put your hands on it, so to speak, and see the realness and could decide for yourself to believe it or not. It's one of the original auditoriums, is what we like to call it, because of all of the many odd things that he found while traveling overseas. That's one of the fun things about Robert Ripley. He said, we collect and exhibit everything. And that's true, whether you're looking at art or pieces of human history. There's so many facets to what we consider odd and unusual. Sitting not too far behind me is a square hole drill. We're used to seeing the regular drills, but this one drills an actual square hole into a blanket. So it's just an odd creation, an odd invention, an odd feat. It really goes back to the creation of the national park here in Gatlinburg and the beginning stages of tourism. And so then after Robert Ripley passed and his collection was purchased, they opened the first permanent auditorium in St. Augustine, Florida in 1950. And just a few attractions later, in the 1970s, this exact location was opened. Right here, I would say all in all, we have over 10,000 different exhibits. A lot of that is video, a lot of that is real things. Beside me is a very unique vase discovered. There are also some things here that were in fact discovered by Robert Ripley. We always have the shrunken heads from the Javaro tribe. People ask us all the time, they think it's a replica, but it's in fact a real shrunken head that we house here. A genuine vampire killing kit. And we do have one item in this attraction that is in fact a fake and not a real, and that is the Fiji mermaid. We still consider them real because they were marketed by Barnum and Bailey in the circus as the real mermaid, when in fact it was really just a monkey and fish sewn together to look that way. That's our one proud item that we have that we're happy to call fake. So behind me is the hand of Willie Camper, and he had the largest hands. I believe he was 8 feet 4 inches and around 450 pounds at the age of 17. He could also hold a dozen eggs in that hand that you see behind me. And this is not obviously not a box of eggs. These are opened dozen eggs without cracking them. Mr. Ito upstairs, he's an Asian man that he wanted to declare his love for a female. I don't know how she took his response, but he hand carved a full-size statue of himself, including plucking his own hair and nails to insert into the statue. So it's truly a one-of-a-kind item. Out front of the attraction, we have something that has really become well known for the building, and that's our Kugel ball. And it's a giant marble ball that weighs several thousand pounds, and it's actually floating on less than an inch of water. And so everybody recognizes the ball when they come to Gatlinburg, and they laugh about, what would happen if it ever escaped and rolled down the parkway, which would never happen, but it's so fun to get there and see children stop it or see how fast they can spin it, and it's just such an interactive that's also such a believe it or not oddity. We have a massive warehouse. If you ask me, I think that's our coolest auditorium. When I go in there, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I could just spend hours looking around. You go through rows and aisles and shelves upon shelves of stuff that's been packed away, and you're just reading the labels on the boxes. And it's really fascinating. We have 95, believe it or not, auditoriums in 10 countries. And so we're always looking wherever we are for new items to add. So we mentioned the warehouse a little bit. That's a place you don't want to be at night because of all the creepy things hanging around, and some people say they're haunted. Really, I feel like everything we do at Ripley's turns out to be a journey. We get these great ideas, and the team ends up having to all get together and just bust it to get it in, and it always works out. But it's some of the most simple things that end up being the most difficult. We have a framed version of the world's largest chewing gum paper chain. It's so large and it has to stay in the frame because otherwise it'll come apart that, it ended up taking forklifts and hand cranes and all kinds of things just to put it up in a lofted area. But it's things like that. It's always a journey to get some of these pieces in. And of course downstairs we have the large action figure made of car parts. Those are always quite a treat to haul around. My family has always lived in this area. I was born and raised here. But as a child, I remember in the summers, Gatlinburg is a very warm family environment. So even as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, my mother would drop us off downtown in the summers, and we would walk around, and to get out of the heat, we would come to all of the Ripley's attractions. We would ride the rides, we would see the shows and go through. And I really never thought that I would come to work at Ripley's, but I did, and it's been the best decision I've ever made. It's awesome to walk through, and our only job every day is to make sure that people are having fun.
We hope you've enjoyed this special look at unique collections in the Volunteer State. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you on the next Tennessee Life.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing and Fabric has what you need for your creative adventure. If it's sewing, embroidery, or vinyl projects you need for a home business, Etsy, Pinterest, and your family, we have it. Mid-South Sewing sells Brothers Sewing and Embroidery machines and the latest scan and cut crafting machine. Mid-South Sewing and Fabric in the Gallery Shopping Center.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by The Flower Pot. For over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you